Hi, this is Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead. Happy to be back with you. I've got a new story called Julie Rescues Big Max. Okay, I'm going to tell you, Julie lived appears in a pretty big town, and says she was on school patrol. She and her best friend Becky were always on patrol on Wednesdays. Julie liked it best in the morning because adults would come through the crossing and they knew that they were supposed to stop and wait until the light they were able to go, and that encouraged the other children to go and obey the rules. Now, Julie loved to talk to the adults, and they would talk to her while they were waiting for the light to change. One of her favorites was Mr. Madison. "Good morning, Mr. Madison," said Julie. Mr. Madison always came with his dog Max. The kids called him Big Max, after the hamburger. Big Mac, after the hamburgers. Julie had always wanted a dog of her own, but her dad said that he wouldn't let her have one. Dogs are a nuisance, feeding them, exercising them, and getting someone to look after them when we go away. Besides, they take up room in the car. Also, Julie's little brother Jason, he was allergic to dogs. Having a dog in a car was one of the reasons Julie wanted a dog. She loved seeing how dogs stuck their heads out the windows, eager to see where they were going. She liked it when she was on patrol, when she stopped the builders' trucks, because the trucks often had dogs in the back. When Mr. Mason stopped at the crossing, Big Mac would always sit until given the signal to cross. He was beautifully trained. Mr. Mason had taken him to classes. "When you have a dog like this," Mr. Mason said to Julie, "you have to make sure you can control him. If a dog behaves badly, it's usually the owner's own fault." Julie got books out of the library about looking after and training dogs. She wanted to know what the right things were to do, just in case something amazing happened and she suddenly had to look after a dog. On Wednesday after school, Becky delivered the free newspaper. And sometimes she and Julie would go through the paper together, reading about all the local events. Julie liked looking at the part of the paper that featured Pet of the Week. This was a picture put in by the animal shelter of a dog or cat that needed a new home. The cats usually managed to look quite cheerful, but the dogs always looked sad. No wonder, because the caption underneath often said something like, "Sammy is a 10-month-old terrier cross. If Sammy doesn't find a home soon, he will have to be put to sleep." Julie knew what put to sleep meant, and she didn't like to think of it. How could her father say no to giving dogs a home that were so sad? Sometimes she would go to the animal shelter to look at the dogs and to talk to them. They were always grateful for some attention. Sometimes Mrs. Rendell, the lady who ran the shelter, would let Julie help her. One morning, Mr. Mason came to the crossing by himself. "Where's Big Mac?" asked Julie. Mr. Mason looked very sad. almost sadder than the pet of the week. "He's been stolen," Mr. Mason said. "I left him outside the supermarket for a few minutes, and when I came back, he was gone. Mack wouldn't run away. He's too well trained." "Why would anyone want to steal Mack?" asked Julie. Mr. Mason shook his head and shrugged. "I only wish I knew where to start looking for him." During school that day, Julie could hardly pay attention. She was thinking about Mack being stolen and poor Mr. Madison being upset. Then she imagined herself discovering the thief and stepping in bravely saying, "That's not your dog, that's Big Mack, and I know who he belongs to." A week later, when Julie was on crossing duty again, Mr. Mason told her he still had no news on Big Mack. He looked sadder than ever. Julie thought that what he needed was another dog, and she decided to go to the animal shelter that afternoon after school. When she got within a few blocks of the shelter, Julie suddenly heard a long, sad howl coming from a rickety old barn, almost hidden from the road. It was the saddest sound she'd ever heard. No one seemed to be around the old barn, so she crept up to the window and she tried to look in. The window was too dusty to be able to see anything, but Julie knew that there was a very sad animal in there. She had to do something. She tried the door, but it was locked tight. Then an idea popped into Julie's head. She turned and ran the 2 blocks to the animal shelter and told Mrs. Rendell about what she had heard. Mrs. Rendell said, "Well, we'll have to check into that." She called in Ross, the van driver, whose job it was to investigate reports of animal neglect. That's when people aren't taking proper care of an animal. He and Julie jumped into the van and drove to the old barn. By the time they got there, the howling and wailing was even louder. Ross pried the door open, and there in the corner in a wire cage was a very big dog. The dog was very thin, and his fur was matted and dirty. As Julie stepped closer, suddenly she saw that this was not just any dog. This was Big Mack. Big Mack wagged his tail and tried to lick her through the wire mesh. He was really a mess, with cuts on his legs and across his back. "Poor Mack, what happened to you?" said Julie. "Big Mack's a very sweet and gentle dog," Julie said, and she gave the dog a hug through the walls of the cage. They got Big Mack out of the cage, and Ross carried him to the van. Big Mack was too weak to walk, but he panted happily as Julie petted his head. At the animal shelter, the vet checked Big Mack to make sure he was all right, and Julie ran to the phone. "Mr. Mason, I'm down at the animal shelter, and there's a dog here I think you'd like to see." "Oh, I don't know, Julie. I don't think there could ever be another Big Mack," sighed Mr. Mason. "Please, just come and see. I think you'll be surprised." Julie could hardly keep from bursting out the surprise. Mr. Mason said he would come down to the shelter right away. When Mr. Mason walked through the door, there was Big Mack waiting for him. He couldn't run to his master, but he did wag his tail wildly. "Mack, my big boy, where did you find him?" He hugged Big Mack and Julie in the same big hug. Julie told Mr. Mason the story, and then the vet filled in about Big Mac's condition. The dog had been mistreated, but he was in good enough shape that he could take him home. Mr. Mason and Julie helped Big Mac limp out to the car, and they headed home. When the car pulled up to Julie's house, Mr. Mason said, "Julie, I really don't know how to thank you. I know how much you want a dog of your own." "Yes," Julie said eagerly, "and I know you can't have one because of your brother being allergic to him and all. But if you'd like, you can come and visit Mac anytime you want. You can take him for walks and groom him and bathe him." "I could be his aunt," said Julie. "That's a very good description," said Mr. Mason. Oh, now she's happy. And, of course, Mr. Mason's happy because Julie rescued Big Mac. Well, we have to take good care of our pets, and it is important for them to be trained to be well behaved. But it's also important that we work hard to protect our pets, because sometimes things could hurt them, whether it's people or other animals, or even just like keeping them safe by making sure they don't go on a road. A lot of things to know about pets. They're wonderful to have. I have pets. I have a couple dogs, and one is a German Shepherd. I think I'm going to show him to you right now. Let me pop that off. Can you see my German Shepherd? Hi, Ruby. Hi. Well, I thought you might like to see my German Shepherd. So, it's Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead. I want to pray blessings on you and yours, in your house, out of your house, in the day and the night. Whatever you do, keep dreaming. And I'll be back again tomorrow. Good night. God bless you. Give my video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. All right. Good night.